Hey everyone, my name is Anton. So, you decided to go into web development, but you're not really sure how to set up a proper local development environment. Not a problem. In this video, I will teach you just that. First, we will set up VVV. Then, we will set up an integrated development environment. And as we go, I'll show you some tips and tricks that I use in my day-to-day development tasks. So, let's get started. Our first task is to install VVV. VVV is ideal for developing WordPress themes, plugins, as well as contributing to WordPress core. It's an open source local development environment focused on WordPress, and it's powered by Vagrant. Vagrant is a tool for building and maintaining development environments. It works with virtualization software to provide a virtual machine sandboxed from your local environment. In other words, Vagrant is going to do the heavy lifting and set up a VM for you to do all the development and handle all the dependencies. That way, if something goes wrong, it's not your system at risk, it's just a virtual machine. Delete the VM image and it's like it was never there. The most common VM providers are VirtualBox, Parallels Desktop, and Hyper-V. And there's even unofficial support for Docker. However, that's still a work in progress. There's a big discussion going on GitHub. I'll link it down in the description below so you can have a look. If you're on Windows, Linux, or Mac with Intel chipset, I would highly recommend using VirtualBox. However, with the recent release of the Apple's M1 chip, unfortunately, VirtualBox is no longer supported. The good news, there is a drop-in replacement, and it's Parallels Desktop. The downside, it's not free, and you will need to cash out about $100 each year for the license. Having used both VirtualBox and Parallels Desktop, I can say that I'm super happy with the solution from Parallels, and if you have the $100 to spare, I would strongly recommend going that route. VVV and Vagrant explain in 10 seconds. VVV is going to provide us with a set of setup scripts and configuration files for your web server, SQL Server, and PHP. It's going to use Vagrant to set up a virtual machine using one of the available providers. All of this is fully automated and you don't need to worry about a single thing. Pro tip number 1. You can time your purchase with a sale. For example, a Black Friday sale, end of year sale, or whatever Parallels has ongoing. Usually, they discount their software at about 20% of the retail price. I'll also create another video on how you can earn $100 in just a day on Upwork, so subscribe to the channel and get notified when that is released. If you're on Mac, another great alternative is Laravel Valet. It's super easy to install, it's free, and you don't need to worry about virtual machines, Vagrant, and stuff like that. However, in my personal opinion, it doesn't really provide you the flexibility a VM does. And you also have to install all the software packages directly on your computer. So if you mess up, it's your system that's at risk. Anyways, back to our setup. VVV requires recent versions of both Vagrant and VirtualBox, or whatever other provider you decide to go with. So let's get into it. The best instructions on how to set up VVV can be found on the official website. I'll also post the link down in the description below. From the website, we can see that the first step is to install Vagrant and Git. So let's do just that. To simplify package management, there's a tool called Homebrew. It's basically a package manager for macOS, and it makes your life so much easier. With just a simple command, you can install any package that you want. For example, if you want to install PHP, you just type in brew, install PHP, press enter, and you're all set. It's as easy as that. Okay, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we actually need to install Homebrew. To install Homebrew, simply copy-paste this command into your terminal window. Press enter. It's going to ask you for your admin password, input that, and press enter. The terminal is going to list all the directories where Homebrew is going to be installed. I'm going to fast forward through the install so I don't have to bore you with all the details. The next step is to install Vagrant. Go to vagrantup.com, click on download. At the time of the recording, the most recent Vagrant version was at 2.2.19, but it could be different for you. To install Vagrant, simply type brew install Vagrant in your terminal window, press enter, and you're all set. To verify that Vagrant was installed successfully, just type Vagrant in your terminal window and press enter. If you see some response, you're all good. Okay, now is actually a good time to install PHP. Remember that command that I told you, brew install PHP? Well, type that into your terminal window, press enter, and wait through the install procedure. It could take you 5 to 10 minutes. To verify that PHP is installed successfully, you can type in this command. Okay, we can see that we have PHP installed, and we're all good. All the latest macOS releases starting from Monterey no longer have PHP pre-installed. So if you haven't installed it yet, it's a good time to do so now. If you're on Linux, Windows, or Mac computers without an M1 chipset, you can install VirtualBox. If you're on an M1 chipset, you will need to install Parallels Desktop. I will link both in the description below, so choose whichever one suits you best. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install VirtualBox, but Parallels Desktops is pretty much the same thing. You go onto their website, download the package for your operating system, and install it. With VirtualBox, you will need to reboot your computer once you install it. There's only one step left. We need to install VVV itself. To install VVV, copy-paste these commands into your terminal. Depending on the OS that you have, select the one that suits you best. Don't forget to install all the required plugins. This will install the Host Manager plugin, as well as copy the default configuration file to its new location. The configuration file is stored under config directory, so let's edit this one right now. When you first open the configuration file, it might seem like a lot of information, but you only need to worry about these sections down here. This is the default site block, and when defining a site, the only required item is the site ID. The description key allows you to provide an optional description, which will be displayed in the VVV dashboard. The skip provisioning key instructs VVV to skip a site when running the provisioner. By default, every website is going to be provisioned. The repo key specifies a Git repository that contains the site to be provisioned. If set, VVV will grab the Git repository, place it in the appropriate folder, and provision the website. Hosts specifies domains and hosts for VVV to listen on. If a Vagrant host plugin is installed, your host file will be automatically updated when the machine is turned on and off. The other directive I wanted to show you is the install plugins. If you want to install some plugin by default, you can list the plugin ID here. Now that we have everything set up, we can run Vagrant up. This will provision a website if you haven't already done so, or it's going to boot up your virtual machine. We've basically just installed and configured the local development environment. But I think we're forgetting one thing. We need a code editor. So let's get to it. I'm going to be using PhpStorm by JetBrains just because that's what I use for my daily development. But you can use any IDE that you want. There are a lot of great free alternatives out there. PhpStorm is a cross-platform IDE for PHP built by JetBrains. It provides an editor for PHP, HTML, and JavaScript with on-the-fly code analysis, error prevention, and automated refactoring. For this tutorial, I'm going to use the free trial version. Download it from their website, install it, and you're all set. The installation is simple. Drag the PhpStorm icon to your applications folder. That's it. When you first start PhpStorm, you will be prompted with a license activation window. If you don't have a license, you can opt in for a trial, but you will need to create an account on JetBrains. To add a new project, click on New Project and select the directory for your project. I usually store my projects in the dedicated development folder. Pro tip number 2. If you're developing a plugin or a theme for WordPress, it might seem logical to add the whole WordPress directory as your project, but it's going to clutter your interface. It's going to add all the WordPress files, folders that you don't use in your project. Instead, link up that WordPress directory to your project in PhpStorm. To make it work, we're going to separate our code from the WordPress installation by using custom folder mappings. To do this, VVV includes the ability to extend the Vagrant file with a Customfile. By placing a Customfile in the main VVV folder, and yes, Customfile is actually the name of the file, you can add additional Vagrant directives. In other words, we can tell VVV where exactly to map our project inside the WordPress folder. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we're going to work on this test plugin, and we want WordPress to see it, but because the plugin is stored under a different path under the development folder and it's not actually inside the WordPress install, WordPress is just not going to see the plugin. If you open up the site that we just created in VVV, you can see that it doesn't list any plugins. So how do we actually map our plugin to the WordPress install in VVV? Let's create our custom file. This is what we need to write in our custom file. Basically what this line does, it tells Vagrant that we need to map our folder under users, Tony, development test. That's the folder that we just added to our PhpStorm project. And we need to map it to our WordPress website that's located under this path. I'm going to paste this line in the description down below. And I'm also going to list the same thing, but for Parallels install, because syntax is a bit different. Okay, once we copy pasted this to our custom file, we can save and close the file. Now, all we need to do is reload our VM. While everything is being prepared in the background, Pro tip number 3. Remember that I told you that VVV is super customizable? Well, let's say you're working on a project that involves using a plugin or testing a plugin under different circumstances. Let's say you want to test it under a single site install, under a multi-site install, or maybe with some specific themes or plugins installed. You create multiple VVV sites and you map your plugin folder or a theme folder inside these websites via the custom file like I just showed you. Super easy and super helpful. Now we can start editing the code. But the problem here is that although we've added our project to VVV and we've added it inside the PhpStorm editor, PhpStorm doesn't actually see any WordPress functions. So as you can see, all the WordPress functions are kind of highlighted, and that means that this function is unknown to PhpStorm. To fix that, we want to make sure our interpreter and path mapping settings inside the code editor are correct. This will allow PhpStorm to detect everything WordPress related and make sure we can easily debug our code. So let's open up PhpStorm settings. We'll be focusing on the PHP section, so let's go over all the options on the right side. PHP language level. Select the minimum supported PHP version for your project. And don't take this lightly. It's an important decision that you need to make, and it's important for a few reasons. First of all, I can almost guarantee you won't have PHP 5.6 set up on your development environment, so there's really no way to know if your code is going to be executed in this environment. Second of all, at the time of this recording, WordPress still officially supported PHP 5.6. So unless you have a compelling reason not to support 5.6, it's a really safe bet to leave this as is. Your users will thank you for that. What this is going to allow you to do is basically tell PhpStorm that it needs to detect and warn us about functions that are not supported in the selected PHP version. For example, let's say our project is following WordPress core guidelines and we try to support the good old PHP 5.6. But accidentally, we've added the return type declaration to one of our methods. PHP is going to catch that and warn us about it. When we do deploy our project, we can be pretty sure that unless we really messed up something bad, our code is going to be compatible with PHP 5.6. Of course, that doesn't mean you can ship your code untested. Test, test, test. Okay, let's go back to the settings. CLI interpreter. Here, we configured the interpreter that PhpStorm is going to use, and we're going to set it up in a way that it uses PHP from the virtual machine instead of the PHP that we have installed on our system. To do this, click on the button right next to the drop-down list, click on the plus icon on the top left corner, and select the first line. Now, because we use Vagrant, we just need to select Vagrant, select the Vagrant installation folder, and PhpStorm is going to do all the rest. Click OK. Now we have PHP 7.4 set up as our CLI interpreter. Okay, but how do we actually make PhpStorm see WordPress functions, filters, and actions? Well, that's what include path is for. Add 2 folders from the WordPress installation path. By default, WordPress is installed under the VVV directory. Here we have our websites. It doesn't matter which folder you select, but I usually select the folder from the first website. Select the website, go into public HTML folder. We will need to add WP-admin and WP includes folder. The reason I don't add WP content folder is because usually it contains a lot of plugins, themes that are not relevant for our project. If you need to add something specific to your project, like let's say you're basing your theme or plugin on Elementor and you need to have that code mapped to your project, just add that plugin from the WP content plugins or themes directory. Let's add WP-admin and WP includes directory to our project. Now that we have this added to our project, PhpStorm is actually going to go and re-index all your files. This might take a while. After PhpStorm finishes indexing all the files, we can see that all the WordPress functions are no longer highlighted. That means we can drop into each of these functions and see what they actually do. If you hold down Command and click on the function, it's going to allow you to drop into that function, and it's going to automatically find this function inside the WordPress files. Isn't it awesome? After we've set up our path mappings, the next thing we need to configure is our quality tools. WordPress has a predefined set of coding standards that are part of the best practices that developers are recommended to follow. And if you go onto the WordPress website, there are CSS coding standards, HTML, JavaScript, PHP coding standards. And if you click on any of these links, you will see that it's quite a lot of rules to remember, right? We're going to rely on PHP Code Sniffer to check all our code against the WordPress coding standards, and the best part of it all, it takes 5 minutes to set up and you never have to worry about this again. To set up PHP code sniffer, we're going to go into the Git repository that contains all the WordPress coding standards. I'm going to link this down in the description below so you can find it easily. We go into the installation section. The README file is going to list a few ways you can install the coding standards on your system. You can go the manual route by installing the coding standards, then installing PHP code sniffer and configuring everything. But there's also a few packages that allow automating all of this. If you don't have Composer installed, you can go to the getcomposer.org website and it's going to tell you how to install it. You will need to copy and paste all these 4 commands inside your terminal. If you want to have Composer as a global command, you will also need to move the Composer file inside your user local bin folder. To verify that Composer was successfully installed, all you need to do is write Composer, press enter, and if you see the output, all good. To install it, select the command. But instead of pasting this command inside your terminal window, we actually need to run it inside our project folder. So let's open up PhpStorm, and down on the bottom you will see the terminal icon. If you click on it, it's going to open up the terminal window right inside your project folder. So let's paste the command here, press enter and install it. Now that we've installed PHP Code Sniffer, we actually need to install the WordPress coding standards as well. The package that we're looking for is called WP Coding Standards VPCS. Copy paste that, go back to our PhpStorm window and type in Composer, require, paste the package name. Now that we have that set up, let's tell PhpStorm where to find everything. Click on Preferences, expand PHP, go to Quality Tools, PHP Code Sniffer, click on the bottom right next to the drop-down list, and now we need to point PhpStorm to our PHP Code Sniffer package. Browse. It's going to be located inside your project folder. So go into your project folder, click on Vendor, Bin. The package that we're looking for, it's called PHPCS. Select that, click Open. Now that we have that mapped, let's click on Validate. As you can see, PHP Code Sniffer is installed and it's working correctly. Now for PhpStorm to see the coding standards, we click on Apply button, go to PHP Code Sniffer Inspections, and select the validation for PHP Code Sniffer rules. On the right side, we will need to set the coding standards. I recommend using WordPress coding standards. If you don't see a list of coding standards here, you will need to click on Installed Standards path and point PhpStorm to the installed coding standards. They are usually located inside your project, inside your vendor directory under the WP Coding Standards. Save the settings and you're all good. Now, every time you write code, PhpStorm is going to detect that you're not using coding standards. So, for example, I know that coding standards require you to use tabs instead of spaces. So let's say we start using spaces. As you can see, PhpStorm automatically highlighted this and it's saying that tabs must be used to indent lines. Spaces are not allowed. Super easy to do, super helpful. There's 2 more things we need to configure in PhpStorm. Open up Preferences. The first thing, we need to tell the editor what kind of code style we want to use. So go to Editor, Code Style, expand it. For PHP, we actually need to select the styles that we want to apply. So click Set From on the right side of the screen, select WordPress, and you're all set. It's automatically going to pre-apply all the code styles that we need for our WordPress project. That's it. So to recap what we did in the video, we've installed and configured VVV, we've installed and set up our integrated development environment, PhpStorm, and I've showed you how to map your project files to the WordPress site that we have in VVV. If this video helped you out, please click on the like button, subscribe to the channel, this helps me out a lot. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching, bye!